Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to another installment of the Healing Brothers podcast. I'm your co-host, Brandon Jones, and I'm with the legendary Sam Simmons. How are you doing today, Sam?
I'm good. I'm good. Trying to stay out of the heat. Uh, you know, as I often say in my old age, what am I trying to re-examine what I'm gonna do when I grow up? You know, uh, looking at some different ways to do my work, try to come more into the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Look at some. I don't know if you call them different approaches or different ways to talk about this whole thing around community trauma, uh, different ways to break it up, and you know, and different ways to approach community leadership and leadership in general around this topic. But yeah, that's about it.
Absolutely. I think and that's where I'm at. Similar to you as far as where are we going with this work, this healing work, this strategy work to move forward to try to help our people get better. And I feel like there's conversations and opportunities that are not being had, but people feel like should be done. And that's kind of what our topic area and focus is for today. So I sent you an article. I think I also sent you maybe a news clip for something that went kind of viral over the last week and a half or so. In Baltimore, 41% of Baltimore high school students earn below a D GPA. So we're not talking about below a 1.9 GPA. 41% of Baltimore high school students, that is what they are earning. And as someone who teaches on a post-secondary level, as a college professor, as someone who's done groups with high school students and middle school students and run programs, that is significant. And I don't think that is seclusive to just Baltimore. I think we are seeing a significant struggle amongst mostly black kids. We're talking about Baltimore, it's a heavily black city. We're talking about urban black youth who are struggling academically. And my fear is that if we don't have real and honest conversations about statistics like this when it comes to healing, what is the future for the black community? Now, 41% is a significant percentage. Now, if they looked at 3.0s and below, that number probably is around 70 something percent, probably higher than that. That is significant. So we have to look at the systematic issues that take place when we talk about healing. It's not just the social and emotional intelligence or learning that needs to take place. There are some institutional things that we have to factor in to this conversation, because that is a ridiculous statistic. We cannot blame that entirely on the school system, but we have to be able to look at what are we doing for our children. We know that here in the Twin Cities, we have some of the worst disparities when it comes to black children and education. So if that's what it is in Baltimore, I need to figure out what it is here. And I think not too long ago there was a study. Let me see if I can find it. Black students in both Minneapolis and St. Paul public schools and their struggles academically. If we don't look at this and have an honest approach to it and talk about how do we help prepare our students for this current society that we're in. We're talking about STEM education, we're talking about robotics, tech, all these things. What's the future going to hold for these young people who are turning 17, 18, 19 years old if they don't have the skills to move forward in our society? So any thoughts on that?
Well, I know what I usually hear when we have these conversations, in particular in terms of the black community or communities of color, is the things that come to head or comes up is the lack of investment, right? The lack of support in especially public schools, because a lot of times they focus on more on public schools because a lot of our kids are in those.
Yeah.
And and the quality of the teachers in those public schools, right? Those three areas come up most often. At least that's what I've noticed, right? And so when you brought up this topic, it's like, oh boy, we're gonna see where this goes. And folks haven't often connected the trauma, other than maybe the trauma of not having those systems in a way that truly appears to care, mm-hmm. right? But we also, but when you look at that, we've seen schools, around the country bring in persons of color as, school commissioners, principals, and in different areas, and some of the stuff slightly improves, but over time it kind of regresses over time, right? I mean, so there's got to be some deeper things, right? And we do know that money can help, right? In any things, but even money can't help if you are not changing your approaches or not taking into account the full person. So, we end up talking about poverty, when you get schools that, the kids, when you got like in some schools, 70% of the kids qualify for school lunch, those kind of things. But that's not just true in for kids of color. We're talking about poverty and those kind of things. So try in terms of making this connection with this, what you often call emotional intelligence around the trauma piece. I think sometimes it's hard for people to hear that, but we know that it's hard for people to hear that about a lot of issues, mm-hmm. right? And so I believe there's a big connection because they did surveys several years ago of a bunch of kids in one of our communities that is probably Black. And they did the survey, and about 50 to 60% was talking about safety. They don't feel safe at home. They don't feel or safe in the community. They don't feel safe in the school. So that has to be a factor that has to be talked about and included.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And safety is important. And I think that one of the things that we've seen over the last few years or so is this engagement of safety in schools. We've seen metal detectors put in schools. We've seen community resource officers being brought in and taken out of schools. And, what is a safe school supposed to look like at this point? We've even got to the point where people have brought up the concept of having teachers having conceal and carries and being able to carry weapons in classrooms. I mean, we have gone all over the spectrum when it comes to safety in schools. But how did we get here? Why does safety in schools how did it become this big thing? Like what's happening in these school buildings from your perspective as far as historical and intergenerational trauma that we've got to this level?
Well, you got to take in consideration when we talk about safety in schools, we also got to talk about what schools we're talking about, right? And what do they mean by safety? You get in some of them more suburban schools and they're talking about the teachers carrying guns. They're talking about safety from the outside world, right? In terms of, you got the so-called, when you white and got a machine gun, you're a maniac, and coming in and shooting up the babies, and so that is when that's what they say they want to arm teachers with, right? But we know that scared people with guns, even if they have license, will end up using it, end up being a problem.
Mhm.
right, can end up being a problem because we see it even with our police forces. Scared people with guns who have the response, who have permission to use those guns when they feel scared. And then you got the statistic of people being scared of black males. Well, black males are in the school, so
Yeah.
when do we end up with that piece? In terms of black school or inner city schools, we had metal detectors as part of those schools from way back when,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of suburban schools don't want to have metal detectors because they don't like the way it looks, right? And so their answer to that is back to that: let the teachers carry a gun and let the resource officer carry a gun in the school, right? And so with those metal detectors, so we're talking about a community that wasn't safe for years. We're talking about back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, they
Mhm.
were starting to have those. But again, we were also talking about that, really the whole issue around economics, no investment in, when you get in that 70s and early 80s, no investment in inner city because whites were moving out, right? I mean, you can literally see it in terms of politics, no investment. So if you ain't got no investment in the cities and you don't have that means you ain't gonna have no investment in schools. And so not only were you having metal detectors in schools, but you were in schools that was probably unhealthy due to asbestos and all the other things that wouldn't be dealt with, lead in the paint and all this other kind of stuff, right? And so the safety, if we looked at safety in schools and we really looked at it, we're talking about bigger than just guns,
Yeah.
right? In terms of school, in terms of safety. Um, um, so, um, yeah. So it becomes a little bit more complicated, many different pieces around that. But when we narrow it all down, is if you are a young person who is dealing with a situation where where do you find your safety, right? And how does that deal with you in terms of your emotional health? um, I'm less likely to care about certain things because I feel like people don't care about me,
Mhm.
right? You can tell me whatever you want, right? It's like telling somebody I love you and then slapping them at the same time, you know. Um, um, so when you start talking about um, um, that whole kind of security and emotions, and we both, I think one of the things I think I should bring up is we both work and have done work and have been trained around ACEs,
Right.
right? And brain science. And all of that information is out there, right? If you have a young person who's raised in survival mode, the part of their brain that gets developed quicker is that part of their brain about survival,
Right.
and makes it a little bit more difficult for them to comprehend certain things. I don't mean they can't. It makes it more difficult,
Right.
right? So we also need to talk about how kids are coming into the school, right? Sometime because of the trauma or the trauma of the parents, right? And the trauma of young parents, right? Because we're talking, when we talk about trauma in the community, we're talking about generational trauma, and we're really talking about a real serious timeline where trauma kind of overwhelmed. Trauma's been part of our community from day one,
Mhm.
right? But we had buffers,
Yeah.
right? And some and then buffers were like community. For a lot of us, it was like church. At least if something was going on at home, there was somebody at church, or if there was something going on at home, there was a teacher that you could count on and that kind of stuff. So there was something to kind of offset that to some degree.
Mhm.
But there became an era or a time frame of about 40 years, okay, that all of those areas just got decimated
Mhm.
all the way around. And so we're talking about, how how do children come into the school? Mm-hmm. So it's not just in the school, but how do you come into school? Mm-hmm. Right. And I know this really sounds really cruel when I say it to a lot of people, is that some children are not ready to be in public when they come to school.
Okay, let's break that down. That sounds a little crazy. So some children are not ready to be in public when they come to school. Break that down.
Well, what I mean is if you are at home and you 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years old, and you living in chaos, and nobody's really helping you with your ABCs, nobody's really helping you learn how to count, other than and this is going to be bad too, how many times you booty shaked and stuff like that. And oh man, that's an extreme. That don't man, it happens enough to be a problem.
Yeah.
And again, somebody listen to this and say, oh, you just being an old black man. Yeah, I'm an old black man, but if an old black man can see, yeah, I've seen it in family, right? Thing is we had a time back when we couldn't get an education, right? That we made it imperative to do a certain amount of teaching of our children at home, right? And we taught them that you go to school to learn.
Right.
You don't go to school to make a whole bunch of friends. You don't go to school to be popular. You go to school to learn, right? My job is to teach you, help you understand who you are, not try to find out who you are later.
Sure.
Right? And you see that difference. I mean, you see that difference even within our community, right? I mean, I see that different with my grandkids. I bet you see that different with your babies. Now, your baby is much younger than my grandkids, putting in that work. And some of our parents are not able to put in the work because they didn't have the opportunity to have the work put in on them. Right? When you just in that survival mode, the last thing you thinking about is sitting down and so if you're not reading stories of hope, then unfortunately in some of our communities, we are seeing we ain't reading stories of hope. We're seeing stories of hopelessness. Okay? And if you start getting this story of hopelessness early, right, and you telling me something than what I've been exposed to, how am I supposed to hear that? Yeah, right? And when I do see a story of hope, it's a hope of instant fame. And instant fame in the short term can make you feel good about yourself. Yeah. Right? And if you do it right, folks ain't gonna forget about you. Even when you become a disaster, folks ain't gonna forget about you.
Like winning the lottery.
What's that little dude, Kishi 9 or whatever that dude is?
6'9".
Yeah, I mean, it's like
that's a little different.
What do you say?
He's Mexican. It's a little different, but I know what you mean.
I mean, example. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, little disaster. I mean, it was, but he's famous.
Yeah. Still is.
Right. So, and I, when I say stuff like this does not mean I'm mad at dude. I'm just saying, look, it is what, those things is an issue. Right. And so when we only look at problems from a singular view, you can guarantee that it's not going to get dealt with. Yeah. Right. And so, so again, you ask the question, not ready for the public. It's like I come into school, I don't even know how to share appropriately. Okay. I don't know how to share appropriately. I'm so used to having tantrums and getting my way. And again, this is not just a black thing, by the way. But the issue is if you got a lot of kids coming in with that kind of of issue, and then you don't have the support mechanisms within the school to deal with that.
Right.
Then on top of that, then we always talking about people being reliant on welfare and those kind of things. But now I'm also relying on school for my breakfast. I'm relying on school on my meals. I'm relying on school on my safety. And I train teachers to teach and not to do all that other stuff. And then you want to get mad at the teacher because he can't handle all that noise.
Right.
So now you got a teaching community that's not supported, who are traumatized. Right. And then on top of that, if I got a choice of teaching at that school and teaching at a different school, right? And then we develop programs with good intentions where you get new teachers. If they go to an inner city school, they can get their loans expunged or paid off and that kind of stuff. So you talk to young teachers. Why did you go to school to be a teacher? Because I want to help kids and teach them. I go into school, it's same, and the guy, what's so ironic about teachers and police? There's a connection.
A lot of times they're coupled together, but they have a similar disposition. They want to help the community.
And where they come from?
Usually outside of the community.
and what kind of experience do they have with folks who are in the schools?
Well, I would say transactional experience is not always pleasant. It's to come and fix a problem.
Right. Or none at all.
Yeah.
Until they get into the community.
Right.
Right. No, nobody's making these connections. Right. And so you get into school, you're trying to deal with the kids and you can see potential in the child, but the child cannot manage their little emotions, because they're used to this letting it go, keeping it real or whatever it may be, right? And you do the typical thing. If there's a phone number that's active, you call the parent and you tell them about the kid. And people say, well, Sam, you're just being extreme. I done seen this extreme too often. Okay. You call the parent asks you, is the kid at school? Yes. So why are you calling me?
Yeah.
And or the kid gets thrown out of school and the parent want to come up and have a problem with you about throwing the kid out of school because the kid is acting up. And now we got rules that you can't throw kids out of school, right? So what do you do with the kids? Yeah. Right. And I'm not saying they should be thrown out of school, but you need to have within the school system a backup system for these particular children. If you want, because the problem comes down to you got a lot of things coming together at once. So I'm a teacher, say I'm a white teacher. I'm scared to death of males because of what I've seen on TV and because I don't have no experience. And you got this young boy and people are like, why are you scared of a 5-year-old? Why are you scared of a 7-year-old? Well, I'm not used to all this emotional response, right? I'm not used to this. I'll give you a prime example. It is not a student. But I got a client. I really love this girl. I mean, she's a survivor, and I worry about her all the time. Young female I work with through a program, and in the program, if you come to group, right, you get a gift card for groceries. Okay, and. And she's off and on homeless. Her kids are in foster care, so she's trying to do all the right things to get her kids, out of foster care, and been doing a really good job showing up at the groups. And so we have the group, and at the end of the group, she says to my co-facilitator, I didn't get my gift card from last time. Y'all only gave me one, and I've been in here two or three times, and and that kind of stuff. And I don't know why I should even come to this group if I ain't getting no gift card. And you know what? Y'all don't do me right. I ain't coming back no more. And I said, girlfriend, calm down. you know you like this group. Yeah, I do, Mr. Simmons. Why are you sitting here threatening people? Well, I just don't like being taken for granted. I said, but you know what? If you wasn't dealing with me, I'll let you leave. Want to tell you why I let you leave? You just threatened me. You threatened me and you threatened the group. Well, Mr. Simmons, I'm gonna keep on coming back. Yeah, I know you're gonna come back because you know you've been learning a lot in the group. You active and you're learning stuff, but other people don't know that.
Yeah.
So now when they throw you out of the group, now you're gonna be in my face talking about how they mistreated you, and I missed the whole point. Do you get my point? And she started smiling. She said, "Yeah, Mr. Simmons, right? That this is an adult who's acting like one of my teenagers or one of my grade school because she's been on survival mode for years. With her boyfriend, with her family, and everybody else. And the only way she know how to respond to being scared or hurt is this over the top, threatening kind of mode. And so if we're not being real, see, we don't want to be real about stuff. And when we're talking about dealing with young people who done been traumatized by their environment, been traumatized by generational trauma, and they only got one mode to really deal with everything, right? And how do you as a teacher deal with that when you ain't had no experience with that kind of stuff, but be scared? And I'm not, and well, they shouldn't be. I don't want anyone to hear that noise.
Right.
We don't want to deal with real. We always want to talk about keep it real. Let's keep it real. I'm not dealing with that. That's why I'm not no teacher. Well, I guess I am because I do my little groups and stuff like that. But folks know real early. Sure. I ain't dealing with that. Right? And they'll tell new people, oh, Mr. Simmons ain't dealing with that. But again, you bring in black staff, right, who might have some experience in dealing with that,
right,
and then you get the other side of them dealing with that, right. Now you hear about a staff that lost their mind because you ain't gonna talk to me like this. Who you think I am? I ain't your daddy, and done cornered the child up and body slammed the child and all that because they done hit their last nerve. And it's like, oh my gosh, we got all this chaos. And then you get my granddaughter who comes home and says, Grandpa, I don't go to school to deal with this foolishness.
Right.
She's 12 years old.
Right.
I go to school to learn, and my teacher spent all the time dealing with these other students. So her mama hurry up and moved them out. I mean, she was getting ready to buy a house in the hood, nice house, that kind of stuff. But the schools that she was going to send my grandkids to, she's like, nah. She canceled. And went about her business because of her children. Not everybody can do that.
Right.
But when you it's all good about bringing, in new meat. But if you're not teaching the new people in schools, what they might come in contact with and tools to deal with them, you're still not doing that teacher any good. Now you done biased this teacher. And you're not doing the student any good because the whole equation did not include kids.
Right.
It included economics. It included easy. It included and all this other stuff. But the kids, right? And then you want to get school systems. Well, the parents this, the parents that. It ain't just. It's everybody.
Yeah.
And now, and I'm sitting here and the connection still comes back to the trauma. The trauma at all the different layers.
Right.
Right? And nobody wants to deal with the trauma because nobody wants to be held accountable. I'm not worried about you being held accountable it's about the children. People say, well, it's about the children. The children is our future. Okay, you look at your children right now. Your future don't look good.
Right. Especially with these statistics.
And so the thing is so you got traumatized communities, you got traumatized families, you got folks working with families in communities don't understand the trauma or ignore the trauma because you're just making the excuse, right? And they want to make everything about them. So these folks don't want education. We mean don't want their kids to be educated. It's like, how do I want something that I don't have?
Right.
And that has not been that I don't see as important to live day to day. It's not important to live day to day. That brings us back to the thing we keep talking about survival stress management.
Right.
If I'm in survival stress management mode, I'm dealing in the moment. Now, if you sit down and talk to me about my children, I'll tell you all the right stuff. Yeah, I want my kids to have a good education and all this other. But as soon as I get back in my environment of stress, all that goes out the window. If I ain't taught you how to connect the dots,
right?
Taught you how to be responsible for your part. If we could get everybody to be responsible for their part, it'll be better off for everybody.
Right.
Right. I mean, again, that thing about some children are not ready to be in public. Y'all need to think about that. Mm. And what is that public that we are bringing them into?
Yeah.
Okay. And I've seen good teachers burnt the hell out because they're catching hell from not only the kids, they're catching hell from the parents, and they're catching hell from the school system because good teachers are flexible. Mm-hmm. Good teachers have some different kind of skills, especially in those environments, right? Mm-hmm. You go to a school and to be a teacher, you learn how to talk about history and all these other kind of pieces, right? But you might not have the skills to deal with different kind of folks. And if you don't, that's okay to say you don't. Or you bring in all your old ideals about dealing with kids, right? That whole thing about discipline. There ain't enough discipline. What does that mean to you?
Beat them.
Or curse them out or whatever. Which even bothers me that I have to even get to that, to deal with that stuff with my own clients.
Yeah.
You in my group. I'm teaching you. I'm treating you with respect. You say you want respect. You want understanding, and I treat you with respect and understanding. And you talk crazy to me, and then I turn around and talk crazy to you, and I feel bad because I had to talk crazy to you, and I apologize. And the client says, "What do you got to apologize for? You didn't do nothing wrong." Yes, I did.
You just met them where they were at. Isn't that harm reduction?
Yeah, but I'm trying to get them somewhere else.
Exactly.
That's why I apologize.
Yeah.
Right. I might meet you there, but I don't want you to keep me there with you.
Exactly. Right.
It got to be a goal of doing better, not just being stagnant. Mm-hmm. It's like in my group, there's like one of the biggest rules is, and I was just thinking about this and talking to my wife about this, what I realized is in my group, because a lot of them are in there because of relationship issues and that kind of stuff. The one big rule is you don't call women out their name. Mm-hmm. And I'm realizing they all follow that. They all follow that rule. Mm-hmm. And we'll call each other on it if they're not, but they follow it. They can do it. At least in that group. Especially when I tell them how you see a person is how you treat a person. Mm-hmm. How you see a person is how you treat a person. And how does it feel when people call you a thug or whatever, even though you might be doing some thuggish behavior? How's that feel? How do you expect them to treat you? So it's complicated, but the biggest complication is nobody wants to deal with their peace. Nobody. Mm-hmm. Right? Yes, we need money, but having money don't change anything. I mean, you sent me the articles out of Baltimore. You sent me videos out of Baltimore. One of the other things I caught up on is you had black folks in leadership. Mm-hmm. Okay. two different people of black folks in leadership. One's under investigation, and the other one seems shady too. It's like, oh, it's like, oh my God.
City to
And
city, you see the same thing play out. But go ahead.
what?
I said city to city, we're starting to see this pattern that's going on. Baltimore is just one place. I mean, we can talk about California. 75% of black boys in California aren't meeting the standard, and we have, again, politicians. Not saying that they are the blame, because I think there's a lot of blame to go around in this situation. But same thing, suspicions of corruption or people under investigation, people not stepping up, and everybody's pointing a finger at each other. It's crazy.
Oh, so you a professor, I mean, you know, a young professor, young educator. You the man, yeah.
I don't know about all that, but okay.
Yeah, you the man. Everybody think you the man. I guess I should be lucky to be in the room with you. The way it sound. So tell us, the man. What is some of your suggestions in terms of this whole thing around the education system?
I think that we're at a point in time, and I think that COVID highlighted this, where schools have to look at doing school, quote unquote, differently. I think that there is an opportunity for a partnership amongst schools and community to figure out how are we going to best prepare these young people to live in society. And I think that's a huge opportunity. There are some things that need to be done first in order to get there, though. Before COVID and we got to this place where we're at today, there's always been this huge divide between school administration and school staff. That needs to be worked on, because if you have the decision makers and the people who are doing the work every day not on the same page, at the end of the day, the students lose out on that. And then if you have families who are not connected to the schools or only get called in when there's behavioral issues, there's a huge miss on there as well. As Black folks, we have to be engaged in the education of our children. I think one of the things that happened, Brown versus Board of Education, once all that was passed, is we really gave up the responsibility of educating our children to the institution of schools, where we had a lot more connection prior. You could tell me better than I can tell you, because you lived through this time period. I'm probably the second generation through it. But at that point, we had more communal school. We had people who knew the teachers, because they all lived in the community together. You couldn't go to the other schools, really. You knew, Mrs. Johnson, who was the third grade teacher, because she lived up the street. And, there was a different connection in the education system than there is today, where I see a lot of parents that have no idea where their students are, who the teachers are or the educators are in their students' lives. And there's a big disconnect. And I think that disconnect what has happened is the community lost a lot of its own agency and responsibility to making sure that children were educated and prepared for whatever future was ahead of them. And I think that in the Black community, we are decades behind what's currently happening. In this world, you have to have skills or you will be in prison or homeless, or you'll be on public assistance, and that might not be there. We are in a very dangerous position due to the fact that education isn't one of those things that we're utilizing as a tool for our success.
So what do you say to Black folks who will point you to self-made individuals within the community, right? Mm-hmm. Who have, became, like, maybe not the best example, rap stars, moguls, and those kind of things. So how do you connect those dots? Because I believe there's some dots you can connect.
I think that those people are very inspirational, but I think those people are like winning a lottery ticket. There's not enough slots and spaces for us to all be entertainers making, multiple millions of dollars. Your probability of becoming a lawyer or an educator yourself, or an entrepreneur or business person, is a lot higher than becoming the next LeBron James, the next Beyonce, the next anybody. I think that the opportunities are there for you to come up, but I think if you're gonna place your bet on an outlier like those folks that are entertainers, good luck, because everybody ain't gonna make it. I look at other ethnic groups, and they're not placing their bets on that. They're pushing their young to be in positions that make decisions on society, not on entertaining society. That's what I say there. We have to be able to craft our young people to be politicians, be lawyers, be a part of healthcare professions and education. That's what we need to do right now. The goal is once you turn 18, get up out my house. Like that's not gonna work. So when you have that mentality communally that once you are 18, you are all on your own, yeah, you're gonna be wishing upon a star to be the next big thing so you can get on. And that's a dangerous way to be in today's society where we have opportunities to get on, but we're not encouraged collectively to get on for us to be participants in the society. Right now, the narratives for Black folks is that the police are out to kill us all. Nobody cares about us because everybody's racist and we don't like each other. So with that narrative, who do you trust? You don't even trust yourself. You're just trying to get how you live and move as quickly as you can. But again, we are on a fantasy island trying to win a lottery to be the next big star, and that's not gonna work. Like you can get on. Like honestly, I think a lot of us we want to be millionaires, which is a great goal. But honestly, most people aren't millionaires. You'll be better off just trying to make $200,000 a year and live a good life. But that's not the goal for us. We want the big flashy things that are put in our faces because that's what we consider to be successful. Not necessarily having stability, make sure that our kids are okay, etc. So that's what I would say to that.
Well, I hear you. But this brings me back from the lens I look at is I don't think we always connect the emotional dots to success, right? Because, right now, if I cannot manage my emotions, I'm not going to be able to manage relationships.
Nope, not at all.
Okay, and if I manage relationships and not do as well in school, but can manage relationships, I can still be successful. Think about what I just said, right? Especially in this day and age, because if I can manage my emotions and learn how to learn, I can still be successful with a minimum amount of school. Yes. I know that sounds sacrilegious because there's so much information. Yeah, we got a bunch of crazy information online, but there's so much information that if you learn how to learn, you can learn a lot of things and be successful. But the other piece is if I can't manage my emotions and manage relationships in a way that people who already know are willing to help me, I can't make it either. Okay? Because see, I can't always talk about staying in school and doing all that school stuff because school was not a friend of mine. Okay. I went because I had to go, but I went because it was one of the few places I didn't have to deal with the chaos at my house. Right. I learned how to read in church. I didn't necessarily read in school. Okay. Because I was going to school at a time when we were making that transition. There was a whole lot of folks who didn't know how to read in school, and it wasn't just black kids. Because I lived in a factory town. Yep. Right. And everybody was you go get your little high school diploma. Everybody graduated unless you was really dumb or really bad.
Get that factory.
Because your plan was to go to the factory. Right. So I know a lot of folks who got GEDs who made it, but you got to be able to learn how to deal with people. Because I've been lucky because I was able to deal with people. Right. Right. I don't have a PhD, but I teach PhD students. Right. Because I've learned how to reason, learn how to live and build relationships. And, you know, some people will doubt that because they think I'm grouchy. But I've had people who supported me who are a lot smarter than me and had the PhDs who believed in me in a way when they were trying to support me, even in my worst days.
Right.
I was able to hear it.
Right.
Right. So I think we're even missing the mark on that, because the thing is we cannot continue to talk about, you know, college. We how many more PhDs do we really need? Right. I know it's been, oh man, he talking bad about P. No, we don't have enough air conditioning and heating workers. We don't have enough folks in electrician, enough, even enough painters, enough construction workers. And then, you know, we got young people who play video games. People don't understand. We got people who get paid for testing video games
and created them and just playing them online.
Right.
There's a lot of opportunities.
But you cannot find these opportunities if you stuck in this whole trauma piece, this whole chaotic emotional stress, and to the point where, like you said, who do I trust? And if I can't learn how to trust anybody, I ain't gonna be able to hear anybody. Right. And I often say trauma affects the way we see things, the way we hear things, and the way we talk about things. And go back to that young lady I was giving the example for, right? When I first started dealing with that group, when she would show up, folks were like, "Oh, here she come," you know, because all she would do is spend all her time talking about how they done mistreated her and all like this, all that noise, and that's like, whoa, what did you do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no. Tell me what you did. Right? Tell me what you did. Right? Well, I got mad and I slapped one of the social workers. Oh. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I got a different social worker. Why she yeah. They all remember what you did. Now they're all scared of you. Right. Now that ain't fair, ain't right. So you're going to have to change how you do some stuff. And she started getting to see her kids. Right? And so school systems don't work for everybody. But the issue is, how do we support families to learn how to learn? Right? And how to move forward. Because not every school, the way schools are set up, they're not for everybody. School wasn't set up for me. The other thing is, what has happened with schools, as far as I'm concerned, is when they decided tests were more important than children.
Right.
And when they started cutting money out of schools, the things that kept kids in schools, they took out. What were those things? Arts. Wood shop, music class, which, you know, all of them teach you how to think. Mm-hmm. Choir. Okay. All those things. You know, there would be days when I would go to school just to go to workshop. I knew if I didn't have a decent grade, I couldn't go to wood shop, or I couldn't go to art. Right? That, you know, that creative part of my brain, open that sucker up, allows other ideals in. Right? And so as a community, we need to really start investing in what we would call community school satellites, so that they will be closer in certain communities. Yeah. You know, they're part of a bigger school system, and you have a satellite in each of those communities attached to that school system, or that's larger school, and really open up schools where you have supports, not just for the school kids, but their families.
Right.
And you got to give them a certain amount of accountability. If you want your kid in this school, these are certain things you have to be involved with.
Right. Yep.
I call it compassion accountability. You know, if there's some chaos going to school, we have counseling in the school, and the family can be involved in that counseling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you talk about single parents, but one of the things is if I'm working with that single parent, a single healthy parent is better than a bunch of but two unhealthy parents if you ain't got both, right? And so the thing is you can't be creative if you're constantly whining about the things you have no control over. That might have been a lot, but that's what I'd say, and I'm sticking to it.
No, I think that's important. Again, we have to invite at some point as a collective, whether that's families or community as a whole, we have to take some ownership over the trajectory or the path that our children are going to take utilizing education. And you know, in the way schools are set up, and I'm somebody I think I've spent 4 years doing school-based therapy. Those schools are not set up to help with critical thinking skills. That's something that needs to come out of the home and out of the community. And I really would encourage community to invest back into the education of our Black youth, because unfortunately our kids are we first of all, let me say this. The United States doesn't have the best education system, period. We're behind a lot of other countries. So if knowing that, we know Black kids ain't gonna get the best opportunities either, but that doesn't mean that the responsibility in us isn't to make sure that we are top notch and that we can compete, and we can move forward, because that's what we need as a collective group. And school isn't for everybody. You're right. But at the same time, what is for everybody is having the ability to do the bare minimum. So literacy, mathematics, critical thinking, social, like we talked about social emotional learning, but able to work with people like you mentioned before. If we can get our kids to be top notch in just those areas alone, they'll figure out a way. They'll make it. They'll move forward in society. I'm not asking for all Black youth to be Rhodes Scholars. That's not going to happen, because everybody can't be that. Everybody can't be that, summa cum laude for each class. But damn, we got to do a lot better than 41% of Baltimore school children are under a D level. At some point, not only has the school system failed those youth, but the community has as well. Because it's like, what's the hope for those 41% of students after they graduate? And these are high school students, so they ain't got a lot of time to fix that. They're going to be in bad situations. 2019 study came out that said 75% of Black boys in California don't meet the state reading standards. It's like, that's significant. That's a lot of Black boys that are going to go where? Unfortunately, probably to the graveyard and or to the penitentiary, because if you can't read, if you struggle with reading, it's going to limit your opportunities to move forward. What we are in a space and place right now where the internet has got rid of a lot of gatekeepers and has opened up a lot of opportunities. And we have to make sure that we are crafting these young people, these young Black folks, to utilize the internet to get on, whether they are at reading levels or not. There are a lot of opportunities to learn how to do things and to make decent living so that you can have healthy families and you can live in this society at the end of the day. And I think that, unfortunately, there's a lot of folks who do the survival stress management, taking it day by day. They're not thinking of what's going to happen 2-3 years from now. And we're going to have a boatload of young people who are really getting lost in the sauce, because there's a lot of competition going on. I mean, I look at what's happening right now. If you just drive around, especially any metro area you're in, especially here in the state of Minnesota, there are a lot of jobs at like places that don't give a lot of income or don't have a lot of hourly wages. So you get fast food jobs, things like that. People ain't taking them jobs. And them jobs is going to what? To robots, to animation, or to automation. Automation. And those are going to be, so if we have these robots competing with humans and the humans ain't ready to compete with the robots or even work the robots, where does that leave people? And that's my fear, is that a lot of Black folks are going to be so far behind that where are we going to go? What are we going to do to maintain in this society? Plus, we have other groups who continue to come flood into our country to compete with us as far as labor. Like, we have to really look at education as an opportunity. Understand, yeah, it might not be for everybody, but it is everybody's responsibility to get as far as we can with it. That's my thought.
Yeah, and you got to break that whole concept of education down too,
Mm-hmm.
right? You talk about I talk about how I learned how to read and write,
Yep.
and that kind of stuff. I
Communicate.
know how, it still wasn't the best, but the thing is I knew how to read and write, but I also knew how to identify opportunities,
Yep.
right? And again, I do what some people consider at some level PhD work, but I don't even have nothing close,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I barely made it through high school, and I do mean barely.
Mm-hmm.
I did a couple years of college, and got that done, which was an accomplishment. But school was not my forte. I do not like doing the usual school coursework.
Right.
Luckily, there's other options now out there in terms of your work experience and those kind of things. But the initial piece is, how do we make environments where kids feel safe in an environment so they can
They
learn
can learn.
at least the basics and learn how to learn. See, there's a difference between learning how to read and write, which is fine,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also another way of learning how to learn,
Right.
making wanting to learn attractive.
Right.
Because again, there's so many other opportunities to learn, not just in school, right? Even being creative with that. I mean, I know some kids who during COVID and online learning who did well, and some of them even did even better because they know they love to learn, and it gave them opportunities to be more creative in their learning. So not everybody's the same, right? And even before COVID, if you have young people who are doing video games or who are online, how do you creatively get them to understand how to use that tool to better learn how to learn,
Right.
right? So we're at America, as we're antiquated when we talk about our school system compared to other leading countries,
Right.
right? The idea that we are, instead of making a better public school system, we got school systems competing against each other,
Right.
right? So we got public school competing against private school. We got public school, private school competing against school of choice, right? So we had a while back where we had folks, anybody who wanted to open up a school, a charter school, could open up a school, you know. And I know this is gonna sound ridiculous. If I wanted to open up a school of truth and lies, I probably could have got that school open, truth and lies. Now again, it probably would have been successful because of my thing. But right, we got all this experimentation on the backs of children, and I know kids who lost in some of them charter schools. These are charter schools that actually even focus on our children that got just lost and tossed to and a whole bunch of folks made money.
Right.
We might not like the way some of these other countries treat their people, but one thing about their education system is, if it's public and it's for our kids to do better and to compete. See, we're so arrogant. We still thinking about competing with each other when the rest of the world is keep competing against each other. We're, it's like playing in the hood when the nation is doing something different.
Yeah. But again, survival stress management, your vision is limited. You got tunnel vision. You're only thinking about yourself. You're only thinking about what's the closest thing to you. You're not thinking globally or wide reaching. You're stuck.
But this is your area of expertise. I'm just a poor old black man trying to make it in my late days.
So the thing is, it's not all doom and gloom. There is hope. I mean, when I see young people like Zalia Avant Grande, the young woman who won the spelling bee and also is a basketball prodigy, I see so many young people like her. I mean, just in the work that I've done, who are just geniuses on multiple levels. Both sides of their brains are functioning on high cylinders, but they don't have the support to keep moving forward. Or when they do get the support, they get taken by another community to advance their objectives. And
Right.
that's what happened to me. I mean, to be honest, as somebody realized that I was a black male who was smart, and they said, let's invest in this young man. And I had opportunities due to my level of intelligence to make other people's dreams come true. Until I said, okay, let me figure out my own path to figure this thing out. But I see that happen with a lot of young black people. And at some point, we have to be able to say that that's one of our young geniuses, and they're doing it for us, and we need to back and support them, not just share their great talents in basketball online. So it's like, hey, at some point there is opportunity for us, but we have to get very serious about cultivating our young to be the next leaders in our community, because our leaders are not entertainers. They're the entertained, because no other ethnic group in the Western Hemisphere has entertainers as their leaders. It's like, if you want society to move forward, you can't get it through LeBron James. It just doesn't happen. So I'll pause there, because I can go on and on and on. And on.
I can tell.
Because it's something I think about, man. I see so many young kids who just they lose hope after a while. I have several young people that I'm connected with that I was either their case manager, their therapist, their mentor, whatever. And now they're in their mid-20s, and it's like, dang, man, like some of them are doing pretty well, but some of them, they got caught up in the system. Multiple kids struggling, just trying to figure it out. And it's just like, if there was more than myself or a few other people that were trying to help guide these young people, the potential was there, but they got caught up. They got caught up at one point or another in the system. And it starts with situations like this, when you see 75% of black boys are not reaching, state reading levels, or 41% are under a D average. It's like, that's a systematic change that we have to take serious to move forward.
So what do you do now? You said some of them young people are caught in the system. I can hear people saying, "See, the system didn't care nothing about them, and see, and the system took them down, right?" Or when you talk about them 70% of the kids, see, the school ain't trying to teach our children. How do you respond to that?
I would respond and say, the schools and the system did try to help. That's how I got connected to them, was through programs or organizations or things of that nature. But it wasn't enough, because there was so much levels of dysfunction and opportunity for dysfunction to happen that they still got caught in those traps. We can't program our way out of this. It takes more than just one, transitional housing program or one therapist to make a difference. There's a lot that goes into this in order to make sure that our children get from the age of 13 to 23 with the ability to succeed. So yeah, the system's going to do what the system does. This is capitalism at the end of the day. And guess what? Capitalism doesn't have morals. So you can go to the prison and make somebody a fortune off prison, or you can go to, University of Minnesota and get an opportunity there. At the end of the day, it's business. And that's where we're at. And the system is dysfunctional. But within this dysfunction, our goal is to make sure our babies don't get caught in the traps.
And I think the key word is our babies. I would say, ask the same question of a community as I ask of the client, right? What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. Right? When I get a client who would tell me everything that's wrong and what has happened, and they're right. They're great historians. Now, they might leave out some parts, but they're great historians. Right? And the part they leave out is, the question is, what you going to do? Mm-hmm. What do you mean? Didn't you hear what I said? I heard everything you said. And I don't even disagree with most of it. But what are you going to do? Or what part did you play? Ooh, they hate that one. And it might not be a big part, right? It might just be this one simple decision that if they had made it differently, it'd have been different, right? Mm-hmm. But even understanding that one simple decision so you don't do it again is important. Again, that is part of what I say about thinking ability, right? Ways to reason, right? It ain't just the ABCs. How do you reason through life? Right. and being stuck in what is obvious even to, as they say, to even Stevie Wonder, and not get to the thing of, okay, so I'm blind to whatever. Now I need to find a new way to learn, and maybe I need some Braille, right? What part do I need to do? But again, when we're talking about in some of the more traumatized communities, when the parents are stuck in that trauma piece, right, that makes it even difficult for young people. It means that we need to also support parents in terms of this framework, right? Because you do need that extra support. Because school is school. School is like the rest of our world. It is what it is. Every man for itself, right? Unless you get that one person who makes that better effort. And unfortunately, some of the we got our a person here, Val. I know the work she put in with young folks.
Right.
I mean, but even that, how many Vals do we have who sometimes put in the work even more and not leave enough for herself?
Yeah. We all need to have a little Val in us in order for our children to have a chance. That's what
but everybody ain't gonna be Val. So how do we how do we systematically do this? Because it's not just systems. The systems might have set it up, but we done found real negative ways to deal with the systems that's having negative ways to deal with our kids and never get outcomes. So that brings us back to that whole emotional intelligence. How do we move trauma aside enough to have some clarity and being able to evolve past this craziness as a community and as individuals?
Well stated. I think that's going to wrap us up for today. So folks, think about this. Think about what can we do in the next, if we wanted to shift the next 15 years for our youth, give them an opportunity better than where we're at now. What can we all individually do for the collective is probably the best way to put it. This has been another installment of the Healing Brothers podcast. Please be sure to share this episode, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We will see you all again next week at 3 p.m. Central Time on Sunday. Peace.